Walk away. That's a Mafia tiger. Let him bleed.
That's a Mafia tiger. Let him bleed. Maribel looked at the dying man, then at her last $5. She thought about Leo waiting for the school bus in the cold morning, and still she walked into that pharmacy. She spent her last $5 on a pressure bandage and electrolyte water, and saved his life without knowing who he was. What Maribel didn't know was this: that choice would change everything, because the very next morning, 100 black motorcycles rolled onto her street. Let me take you back to the morning before that alley, before everything changed. Maribel's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. like it did every single day. She dragged herself out of bed in the cramped apartment she shared with her 9-year-old son, Leo. The place was small, peeling paint on the walls, in a neighborhood where people minded their business, but it was theirs. She opened the kitchen cabinet. 1 box of instant oatmeal, 3 packets left, a gallon of milk, barely enough for 2 more days. She made Leo's breakfast and packed his lunch with what little they had. She didn't eat. There wasn't time, and there wasn't enough. "Morning, Ma," Leo said, stumbling in with his backpack already. "Morning, baby." Maribel kissed his forehead and handed him his lunch bag. He was getting so tall, growing out of his shoes faster than she could replace them. This was life now, counting every dollar, walking miles to save bus fare, praying nothing broke because there was no margin, no backup plan, nothing left to lose. Maribel worked delivery routes all day, every day. Sometimes she made $40, sometimes less. Her feet ached in her scuffed sneakers, the soles worn so thin she could feel every crack in the sidewalk. Rent was due in 5 days. She was $200 short. Leo needed new winter boots, $35 she didn't have. The electric bill had a red "Final Notice" stamp on the envelope. But Maribel didn't complain. Her grandmother had raised her with one rule: do what's right even when it costs you, baby. That's the only thing that makes you rich. So Maribel smiled at her customers even when her exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders. She helped elderly neighbors carry groceries even when her arms were full of packages. Every night she whispered a prayer of thanks for what little they had. That Tuesday started like every other day. Maribel's delivery shift started at 6 a.m. sharp. She laced up her scuffed sneakers, the left one with a split along the side, the right one held together with duct tape on the sole, and stepped out into the cold. No makeup, no time for that. Her natural hair was pulled into a low bun, messy from sleep, and it would stay that way all day. Her face was bare, tired eyes reflecting back at her in the hallway mirror as she locked the apartment door. Deep brown skin, high cheekbones, the kind of face that looked older than late 20s because exhaustion had carved itself into every line. She pulled her faded hoodie tight against the wind and started walking. The delivery company didn't provide vehicles for contractors like her. You used your own car, your own bike, or you walked. Maribel's car died 8 months ago. The bike got stolen 3 months after that. So she walked, mile after mile through streets that never seemed to care how tired you were. Her route that day covered the industrial district, 12 packages spread across a 4-mile radius. Heavy boxes, apartment buildings with broken elevators, businesses with back entrances down narrow alleys. By 9 a.m., her calves were burning. By noon, she delivered 8 packages and earned $22. The app on her phone dinged. New delivery, a pharmacy order heading to the east side, $4.50 payout. She accepted it without thinking. Every dollar mattered. She picked up the small bag from the pharmacy on Brennan Street, the same one she'd be standing behind in just a few hours, holding her last $5. But right now, in the afternoon light, it was just another stop, just another few dollars. The clerk barely looked at her. She was invisible here, invisible everywhere. People didn't see delivery workers. They saw the package arriving. They saw the convenience. They didn't see the woman who'd walked 6 miles in shoes that should have been replaced a year ago. Maribel kept moving. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leo's school. Reminder, field trip permission slip due Friday, $15 fee. She closed the message. She'd figure it out. She always did. By 4 p.m., she'd walked 11 miles. Her lower back ached. The hole in her left sneaker had gotten worse. She could feel the pavement now, cold and rough against her sock. 2 more deliveries left. She stopped at a corner store and bought a bottle of water for $1. She couldn't afford it, but her throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. She stood outside and drank it slowly, watching the city move around her.
Business people in clean coats, cars passing with warm interiors, a world that functioned on money she didn't have. Maribel looked small, standing there on that corner, slim, wiry, like the city could blow her away if it wanted to. But she was grounded, rooted in something deeper than circumstance. She finished the water, tossed the bottle in the recycling bin, and checked her phone. Last delivery, 1847 Keller Avenue, apartment 3B. She started walking again. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of amber and gray. Her shift would end in 2 hours, and then, after one more delivery, everything would change. The alley behind the pharmacy was darker than it should have been. One of the streetlights was out, the other flickered weakly, casting shadows that moved like living things across the wet pavement. Maribel had taken the shortcut without thinking. She always cut through here on her way to the bus stop. Saved 3 minutes. 3 minutes meant she could sit down sooner, rest her feet. But tonight she heard something. A sound like air being forced through clenched teeth, ragged, desperate. She stopped. There, slumped against the brick wall near the dumpster, was a man. Broad-shouldered, even in collapse, black leather jacket soaked through but not from the rain. The dark stains spreading across his side was too thick, too red. His face was turned down, square jaw tight with pain. Dark hair with gray streaks fell forward, partially hiding his expression. Maribel should have kept walking. Every instinct her grandmother ever taught her said, call 911 and keep moving. Don't get involved. Not in this neighborhood. Not with someone who looked like that. But then he lifted his head. Sharp eyes, hooded, the kind that had seen things Maribel couldn't imagine. Even through the pain, even with his skin going pale and his breathing shallow, those eyes carried authority. Dangerous authority. They locked onto hers, dark and unsettling, and somehow resigned. He wasn't asking for help. He'd already accepted he was going to die here. Maribel's hand moved to her pocket. The $5 bill was still there, folded, warm from her body heat. Leo's bus fare. You should go, the man said. His voice was low, controlled even now. Accent thick. Korean, she thought. This is not your business. She knelt anyway. Up close, she could see the wound, a stab wound deep in his side, blood pooling on the concrete beneath him. His breathing was getting worse, short, shallow gasps. You're bleeding out, Maribel said quietly. Her hands hovered over the wound, not touching. She didn't have gloves, didn't have anything. I said go. His eyes narrowed. You don't know who I am. I know you're dying. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Her tired eyes, dark brown, alert despite the exhaustion, quietly compassionate in a way that felt almost painful. His sharp, hooded gaze, studying her, calculating, trying to understand why this small, worn-down woman wasn't running. A heavy ring glinted on his right hand, old gold, engraved with symbols she didn't recognize. He wore an expensive watch, scratched but clearly valuable. Even his plain dark shirt under the jacket looked tailored. This wasn't some random street fight. This was someone important bleeding out in an alley. "The pharmacy," Maribel said, already standing. "They have pressure bandages, medical supplies." "You have money." His voice was fading. She pulled out the $5 bill, showed it to him. Leo's bus fare. Her last $5 until Friday. The man's expression shifted. Something flickered in those dangerous eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "Then go," he whispered, "before I die and you have nothing." Maribel was already moving towards the pharmacy door. The pharmacy's back door was locked, but the clerk saw her through the grass. Young guy, early 20s. He'd barely noticed Maribel when she'd picked up the delivery earlier that afternoon. Now he was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. He cracked the door open. "We're about to close. I need a pressure bandage and electrolyte water, the kind with the blue cap." The clerk's eyes shifted past her, towards the alley. His face went pale. "You saw him. He's bleeding out. I need—" "No." The clerk stepped back, starting to close the door. "Absolutely not. I'm not getting involved in that." Maribel wedged her foot in the doorway. "I have money. $5. Just sell me the supplies." "Lady, do you have any idea who that is?" "Someone who's dying." The clerk laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "That's Yon Sok. You understand? That's not some guy who got mugged. That's a Mafia tiger." Maribel didn't move. "The bandage, please." "You help him. You're marked. His enemies will come looking. His people will expect loyalty. You think $5 buys you out of that?" The clerk shook his head. "Walk away. Let him bleed. That's what anyone with sense would do." "I'm not walking away." They stared at each other through the cracked doorway. The clerk's hand was shaking. He kept glancing towards the alley like something might come crawling out of the shadows. "Please," Maribel said quietly. "I don't know anything about Mafia tigers or loyalty or debts. I just know a man is dying 30 feet from here, and I can't—" Her voice cracked. "I can't just walk away." The clerk was silent for a long moment. Then he cursed under his breath and opened the door wider. "You're insane," he muttered. "Completely insane." Maribel followed him inside the pharmacy. The fluorescent lights were too bright after the darkness of the alley. Everything felt surreal. The neat rows of products, the quiet hum of refrigerators, the normality of it all, while a man bled out just beyond the wall. The clerk grabbed a military-grade pressure bandage from the locked cabinet, then a bottle of high electrolyte water from the cooler. He rang them up without looking at her. $5.32. Maribel laid the $5 bill on the counter. "That's all I have." The clerk stared at the bill, at her tired face, at her scuffed sneakers with the duct tape and the split seam. He pushed the items toward her. "Just take them. Get out of here." Maribel gathered the supplies, her hands trembling now. "You're throwing your life away," the clerk said, as she turned toward the door. "You know that, right? For a man who'd kill you without blinking if you crossed him." Maribel paused in the doorway. "Maybe," she said, "but at least he'll be alive to make that choice." She walked back into the alley. Gyeonsuk was still breathing, barely. Maribel dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the blood soaking into her jeans. Her hands moved on instinct, tearing open the pressure bandage package, pressing the thick gauze against the wound. Gyeonsuk sucked in air through his teeth, but didn't cry out. "Hold this," she said, guiding his hand over the bandage. "Press hard." He did. His grip was still strong despite the blood loss. She twisted open the electrolyte water and held it to his lips. Drink, small sips. He drank. Water spilled down his chin, mixing with the rain. Color was starting to return to his face. Not much, but enough. You need a hospital, Maribel said. Already called. His voice was stronger now, controlled again. They're coming. As if summoned, headlights swept across the alley entrance. A black car, sleek, expensive, windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors, rolled to a stop. The engine purred. Quiet. Powerful. 2 men got out. Both wore dark suits. Both moved with the kind of precision that Maribel's stomach tightened. They saw Gyeonsuk and immediately moved toward him, lifting him with practiced efficiency. No questions, no panic, just smooth, coordinated action. One of them glanced at Maribel. His eyes were cold, assessing. She helped, Gyeonsuk said. His voice cut through the tension. She stays untouched. The man nodded once and turned away. They were loading Gyeonsuk into the back seat when he stopped them, said something in Korean, sharp, an order. One of the men reached into his jacket. Maribel tensed, but the man only pulled out a small cloth bag. He handed it to Gyeonsuk, who took something from inside. "Come here," Gyeonsuk said, to Maribel. She stood slowly, legs shaking, walked to the car. Up close, even injured and pale, Gyeonsuk radiated authority. Those sharp, hooded eyes locked onto hers again, still dangerous, but something else now, something that looked almost like respect. He held out his hand. In his hand was a coin, heavy, gold, engraved with symbols that seemed to shift in the flickering streetlight. A tiger on one side, characters she couldn't read on the other. "Take it," he said. Maribel hesitated. "I don't want payment. This is not payment." His voice was quiet, but absolute. "This is a debt. My debt to you. You understand?" She didn't, really, but she took the coin anyway. It was warm from his hand, heavier than it looked, the kind of heavy that meant something beyond metal and weight. "What's your name?" Gyeonsuk asked. Maribel Knox." He nodded once, committed it to memory. Then the car door closed, and the black vehicle disappeared into the night. Maribel stood alone in the alley, holding a mysterious coin and an empty water bottle. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leo. "Made it home. Love you, Mom." She looked at the coin in her palm, then at her empty pocket where Leo's bus fare used to be. Tomorrow morning, he'd have to walk to school. She'd given away their last $5 for a man who might have been a killer, and somehow, standing there in the blood-stained alley with rain starting to fall again, Maribel didn't regret it. Maribel woke to pounding on her door. It was 6:15 a.m., 45 minutes before her alarm. Leo was still asleep in the next room. She pulled on her hoodie and opened the door to find Mrs. Chen from 4C, Mr. Rodriguez from across the hall, and 3 other neighbors crowded in the hallway. Mrs. Chen's face was tight with anger. "Is it true?" "What is true?" "Don't play stupid with me." Mr. Rodriguez stepped forward. "My cousin works nights at that pharmacy on Brennan. He saw you helping one of them." The word hung in the air like poison. Maribel's stomach dropped. "I helped an injured man, that's all." "That wasn't a man," Mrs. Chen hissed. "That was Yoon Gyeonsuk. You know what that means? You brought Mafia into this building, into our homes. I didn't bring anyone." "His enemies will come looking," a woman Maribel barely knew spoke up from the back. "They'll come here, to this address, and when they do, our kids are the ones he'll pay. I just stopped someone from bleeding out. I didn't." "You think the Mafia cares about intentions? You think they'll knock politely and ask which apartment is yours? They'll tear this whole building apart."
Leo's door creaked open. He stood there in his pajamas, small and confused. "Mom? Go back to bed, baby," Maribel said softly.
But Mrs. Chen had already seen him. Her expression shifted from anger to something worse, pity mixed with contempt. "You have a son, and you still did something that stupid?" The words hit harder than a slap. "Get out of our building," someone said from the back, "before we get us all killed." "This is my home," Maribel said. Her voice was shaking now. "I pay rent here just like you." "For how long?" Mr. Rodriguez crossed his arms. "Word's already spreading. People know you're connected now. You think the landlord will let that slide? You think anyone will want you here?" Mrs. Chen leaned in close, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "My grandchildren visit me here. I will not have them in danger because you decided to play hero for a gangster." She turned and walked away. One by one, the others followed. Mr. Rodriguez lingered for a moment. His expression was almost apologetic. "You should have let him die. That's the rule in this city. You see trouble, you walk away. You broke the rule, Maribel. Now we all pay." He left, and the door across the hall slammed shut. Maribel stood in her doorway, listening to locks clicking all down the hallway, one after another, sealing her out, marking her as dangerous. Leo came to her side. "Mom, what's happening?" She pulled him close, her hand trembling as she stroked his hair. "Nothing, baby. Everything's fine." But when she went to take out the trash that afternoon, someone had spray-painted 2 words on the wall beside her apartment. Mafia rat. The sound started at dawn, a low rumble that grew louder, deeper, like thunder rolling from every direction at once. Maribel was pouring Leo's cereal when the windows began to shake. She set down the milk and walked to the window, pulling back the thin curtain. Her breath caught. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, more than dozens. Black bikes with chrome that caught the early morning light. Riders in leather jackets, faces hidden behind dark helmets. They rolled down the narrow street in perfect formation, engines roaring in synchronized rhythm, one after another, 50, 70, 100. They filled the entire street, blocking traffic, blocking everything. The sound was deafening even through the closed window. "Mom?" Leo's voice was small, scared. Doors were slamming open up and down the building, people rushing into the hallway, shouting. Panic spreading like wildfire. "They're here for her! I told you she'd bring them! Call the police!" Maribel's heart was hammering. The coin, she'd left it on the kitchen counter. She grabbed it now, the gold heavy and warm in her palm. Outside, the motorcycles came to a stop, all at once, 100 engines idling in perfect unison. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police were coming. The whole neighborhood was awake now, people gathering on stoops and fire escapes, pointing and shouting. Mr. Rodriguez appeared in Maribel's doorway, his face pale. "You need to leave, right now, before this turns into a war zone." But Maribel couldn't move. She was frozen at the window, watching. The riders dismounted, stood beside their bikes in formation, and then the formation parted. A black car rolled through, the same sleek vehicle from the alley. It stopped directly in front of Maribel's building. The back door opened. Yoon Gyeon-suk stepped out. He wore a tailored black coat now, his dark hair slicked back perfectly. The gray streaks caught the early morning light. His sharp jaw was set. Those sharp, hooded eyes scanned the building until they found Maribel's window. He looked up, directly at her, and bowed. Not a small nod, a deep, formal bow that held respect and honor and something Maribel had no words for. Then he turned to the crowd of neighbors gathering on the street. His voice carried, accented but clear, amplified somehow so everyone could hear. 3 days ago, this woman saved my life. He gestured toward Maribel's building. She had $5, her last $5, money for her son's transportation, and she spent it on bandages for a stranger bleeding in an alley.
The street had gone silent except for the idling engines. She chose kindness when the world told her to walk away. Gyan-suk turned back toward Maribel's window. "Today, I repay that debt." He raised his hand. The bikers moved as one. Gyan-suk walked towards the building entrance with measured steps. The crowd parted without being asked. Police cars had arrived, officers standing with hands near their weapons, but nobody moved. Nobody dared. This wasn't a threat. Everyone could feel it now. This was something else entirely. Maribel's legs finally obeyed. She moved to the door, Leo clinging to her side. "Stay here, baby." "Mom, no!" "I'll be right back, I promise." She kissed the top of his head and stepped into the hallway. Mrs. Chen stood frozen in her doorway. Mr. Rodriguez had backed against the wall. Every neighbor who'd pounded on her door yesterday now watched in stunned silence as Maribel walked towards the stairs. Her scuffed sneakers barely made a sound. She descended to the ground floor, pushed open the building's front door, and stepped into the morning light.
Gyan-suk stood, waiting. Up close, in daylight, he looked different than he had in the alley. The dangerous authority was still there, would always be there, but now it was wrapped in tailored fabric and formal bearing. His face was composed. The wound in his side was hidden beneath expensive clothing. Behind him, 100 bikers stood at attention beside their motorcycles. "Maribel Knox," Gyan-suk said. His voice carried across the silent street. "You knelt beside a dying stranger. You spent money you could not afford to spend. You ignored warnings from those who told you to walk away." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "In my culture, a life debt is absolute. It cannot be repaid with simple gratitude. It requires action, honor, restoration." He held out the envelope. Maribel's hands trembled as she took it. It was heavy, too heavy. "This is $30,000, Gyan-suk said, "to restore what you sacrificed and more, but money alone does not honor the choice you made." He gestured. 2 bikers rolled forward a set of keys dangling from one rider's hand. "A vehicle," Gyan-suk continued, "so you never walk 12 miles in broken shoes again." Another biker stepped forward with a leather folder. "A scholarship fund for your son. Full education, university included, already established in his name." Maribel couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. And finally, Gyan-suk pulled out a folded document. "The deed to a home. 3 bedrooms, renovated, paid in full, in a neighborhood where your son can play safely." He placed it in her shaking hands. "This is not charity, Maribel Knox. This is debt. My debt to you. A debt I will carry with honor for the rest of my life." The street erupted, not with fear, with sound, applause, shouting, neighbors pouring out onto stoops, some crying, some laughing in disbelief. Mrs. Chen's hand was pressed to her mouth, tears on her face. Mr. Rodriguez was shaking his head, smiling despite himself. Gyan-suk bowed again, deep and formal. "You did not look away," he said quietly, meant only for Maribel. "In a world that teaches people to turn their backs, you chose kindness in blood." He straightened. "That choice saved more than my life. It reminded me why we protect this city in the first place." The van was silver, brand new, with sliding doors and seats that still had plastic covers. Maribel stood in front of it, keys in one hand, envelope of cash in the other, unable to process what was happening. Leo had come downstairs now, standing beside her with wide eyes. "Mom, is that ours?" "I think so, baby," she whispered. One of the bikers, a woman with kind eyes visible through her raised visor, stepped forward. "The title's in your name. Registration, insurance, everything. All paid for 3 years." 3 years. Maribel had never owned anything paid for 3 years in advance. Another biker opened the van's back doors. It was filled with boxes. Furniture, she explained, for the new place. Beds, couch, kitchen table, everything. We'll deliver it this afternoon once you've seen the house. I can't. Maribel's voice broke. The woman smiled. You already did, 3 nights ago in an alley. Kiansek approached with the leather folder, opening it to reveal official documents with gold seals and signatures. The scholarship, he said, handing the folder to Leo. Your mother gave her last $5 so you could have a future. Now that future is guaranteed. Leo looked up at Maribel, then at the papers, then back at his mother. His eyes were shining. $50,000, Kiansek continued, managed by a trust. It will cover private school if you choose, then university, books, housing, everything. Your mother's sacrifice will never be forgotten. Mrs. Chen came down the steps slowly, her earlier anger completely gone. She stopped in front of Maribel. I'm sorry, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I was scared. I said terrible things. Maribel shook her head. You were protecting your family. So were you, Mrs. Chen touched Maribel's arm, but you protected a stranger too. That kind of courage I don't have. Other neighbors were gathering now, not with suspicion nor fear, but with something that looked like awe. Mr. Rodriguez came forward next. The whole building owes you an apology. We didn't understand. Nobody understands until they're the one bleeding in an alley, or the one who has to choose to stop. Gyansek turned to address the growing crowd. Maribel Knox is under my protection now, not because I own her, not because she owes me, but because she represents something rare in this world, true kindness without calculation. He looked back at Maribel. The house is ready whenever you want to see it. The van is yours to drive today. The money is yours to use however you need. But there is one more thing. He pulled out a business card. Simple, black with gold lettering. When you're ready, if you're ready, I would like to offer you a position. Director of Community Outreach for an organization I'm establishing, the Kiansek Foundation. Maribel stared at the card. You would manage resources for people like you, people who fall through the cracks, people who need someone to see them. His sharp eyes softened. You would do what you did for me, but for an entire community. 1 year later. Maribel pulled the silver van into the foundation's parking lot just as the sun was setting. The building wasn't fancy. A renovated warehouse on the east side with large windows and a sign that read, The Ji-an-sak Foundation, Community Resources and Support. She'd been director of community outreach for 11 months now. Leo was thriving in his new school. Their house, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a neighborhood where kids rode bikes after dinner, felt like a dream she kept waiting to wake up from. But every morning she drove this van to this building and remembered, it was real. All of it was real. She grabbed her bag and headed inside. The evening shift was just starting. Volunteers preparing meal kits, organizing donation boxes, setting up the computer lab for job search assistance. Maria, one of the volunteers, waved from the front desk. Maribel, there's someone waiting in your office. Been here about 20 minutes. Says it's urgent. Maribel nodded and walked down the hallway, past walls covered with success stories and thank you letters from families the foundation had helped. Her office door was open. A man sat in the chair across from her desk. Mid-30s, worn work jacket, hands clasped tight between his knees. His leg bounced nervously. Hi, said Maribel gently, closing the door behind her. I'm Maribel Knox. How can I help? The man looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, the same kind of tired Maribel used to see in her own mirror. "My name's Marcus," he said, his voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go." Maribel sat down across from him. "Tell me what's happening." The story came out in fragments. Marcus had been laid off 3 months ago. His wife was sick, needed medication that insurance wouldn't fully cover. They had 2 kids, rent was due, the electricity had been shut off yesterday. "I've been doing day labor, whatever I can find, but it's not enough. It's never enough." He wiped his eyes roughly. "My daughter asked me this morning why we couldn't turn the lights on. She's 6. She shouldn't have to ask that." Maribel felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that never fully went away. She remembered standing in her old apartment, the overdue notices, the empty cabinet, Leo's face when she couldn't afford his field trip. "Maribel," she said quietly, "you came to the right place." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out the foundation's emergency assistance forms. "We can cover your electricity bill today. Get it turned back on tomorrow morning." She grabbed another form. "Rental assistance. We can help with this month and next while you get back on your feet. And the medication for your wife? What's the cost?" $300 a month. "We'll cover 3 months. Give you breathing room." Marcus stared at her. I can't pay you back. Not right away." Maribel smiled. The same tired, compassionate smile she'd worn in that alley a year ago. She said, "You don't pay it back. You pay it forward. When you're stable again, when you're on your feet, you help the next person. That's how this works."